Now we're live.
Now we are live.
Okay, there we go. Okay, Kings, we're live. I mean, I don't know. I repeated that. I just told you we're live.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to this celebration. 1,000 subs.
1K. It's cool. It's cool to be doing this. And now we're live. Subscribing.
Now we are live.
Kings on here, and we're gonna chat. Okay, there we go.
Soon.
Okay, Kings, we're live. I think I just fixed it. I mean, I don't know. I repeated that. I just told you we're live.
And we should be having no problems at all. Let's just do a little promotion tweet.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, what's been going on, Kings? How you doing?
I'm pretty good. You know, I've been doing my thing. I've been reading more, arguing on Twitter less.
Yeah. What have you been reading?
Just the other day, I finished reading Nathan Tankis's new report he had out about non-fiscal pay-fors. That was very good. Still reading Post-Keynesian Price Theory by Frederick Lee, which is classic.
Yeah. So I feel like you're drifting towards the kind of post-Keynesian strand of economics, I guess, because you've been reading a lot about it, and you had that excellent series of articles on it on your little Medium, and I really enjoyed reading them. So it's nice to
I really enjoyed reading the book. It was there was a lot of stuff that was like
I was waiting for you to stop moving.
That just once I actually read that introductory textbook, I'm like, oh, this makes much more sense as to how the real world actually operates, how firms actually make decisions and stuff. Like, I get it now. Really insightful. It was good. Yeah, and I've been studying more monetary policy stuff too, which makes my brain hurt, but I'm getting it. I'm getting there.
What kind of stuff have you been reading on monetary policy?
Just a lot of times the random stuff. My man Joey Politano on Twitter.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Every like week or so, I'm like, Joey, I don't understand how this works at all. Help! And he's like, all right, I got you, man. Here's some articles.
Well, that's how I got. I mean, that's how I got started on like welfare policy. It was just like DMing you about stuff that I didn't understand. It, like stuff like effective marginal tax rates and things like that. So it's nice to see that you're doing that in your own time too. Joey's amazing. He's so. Oh yeah.
Incredibly smart. I am shocked at the fact his actual job isn't like this, and he still has so much knowledge about it. It's really impressive.
Doesn't he work for the BLS according to his Twitter?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
But his job is not like related to any of the things that I forget what he does exactly, but it's not like he's not like monitoring employment statistics and monetary policy in his normal job. But he still does like all this amazing analysis. Yeah, he.
Oh, he's got incredible articles. We'll link that, of course. Obviously, we always do. But yeah, it's I think it was just cool to see the BLS put out the charts of like how the recovery was going from the pandemic driven recession, and it was just cool to see like how fast we got like back on our knees, and it's cool to see the kind of role that I guess the state can play in this. So I think that's a big vouch.
There's so many charts of just like the giant V that happened during the recovery of like employment and GDP growth just plummeting and then shooting right back up again.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And okay, so I mean, what do you? So I'm not really I haven't really been paying attention to all the inflation hawk stuff that's going on, but like what are your opinions on that? It seems like
Yo, Otter. Hey.
Yeah, he's on there.
What's up, man? Hey, if you wanna jump on call, just give us a sign. We'll make you join.
Oh yeah. See if Chad's on there.
Chad. We can't see exactly who the viewers are. They need to like.
No. I mean, see if you can.
Oh, see if I can bring him in.
Yeah.
I gotta rename my Floatzel in Pokemon Legends Arceus to Otter.
Oh yeah, Otter's honest. Otter's the best. It's one of I mean, like I wish I was that knowledgeable at that age. It's fantastic to see someone that's so.
I wish I could just read that much. Period. Like maintain that level of focus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, and especially his Google Drive, which I don't know if it's still up or whatever, but it's a fantastic piece of work. Yeah.
He sent me so many cool papers.
Oh yeah, he's a really cool dude. Okay, let me
see.
Let me DM Chad.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to add him to the call from this popped out screen.
So have you tried Warzone yet, Keeks? Can I extol
Oh
the
my
virtues
God,
of this
every
beautiful
single
game to you?
Alright, Sid, listen. Here's the thing.
You promised me that we
I
would.
did promise you. I know.
you specifically made a vow to me that we would play Warzone sometime.
My word's
Wait,
coming
wait.
back to bite me. I ordered a 4 terabyte hard drive to keep
Yeah.
all my games on,
Yeah.
and it just didn't get delivered, and I got a refund, and I don't know what happened, but I am not sure I have room for that big of a game right now.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, how many? It's multiple tens of gigabytes, right?
Oh, it's hundreds. So I have like a Xbox, the Xbox S.
Show the camera real quick because I need to do a little something. You
X-
guys keep
Okay.
on talking.
Yeah, I know. I had the Xbox One S, and it only had like 500 gigs. And when I downloaded Warzone plus the multiplayer, it took out like half my hard drive. It's nuts. I don't know like why the game is so big, ridiculously big.
Yeah,
a
no, I
lot
can't.
of,
I
a lot
tried.
of games are just
Yeah.
huge nowadays.
This guy needs to accept your friend request. That's demon. So what's new? What's new in the Warframe world? I've heard great things about it.
Start streaming this in a second. A big new. So yeah, I'm about to be streaming Warframe, which I have over 1,000 hours in Warframe now.
Yeah.
Probably my most played game ever. It's very good. You're basically a magic space ninja.
Oh, always wanted that.
Who would not want to be a magic space ninja doing parkour?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And yeah,
I've played it a bit. It's really fun when you start getting going, but I hear that like the big grind at some point kind of gets to you.
Yeah, no, it takes. Let me remember how to stream games.
Hey, Beam Cheap.
Yeah, no, just feel free to stream whatever. This is very impromptu and very informal, so do whatever you gotta do.
So yeah, it takes forever to like actually get to the part of Warframe that most people play, like the more I don't even know if end game stuff is the right word because there's so much of it.
Just
It
in
takes
depth.
you can go anywhere throughout the solar system, and it takes about 250 hours, I would say, to get through the whole solar system.
Mm-hmm.
That's how long it took me. And yeah, and then there's a shit ton of content after this. And yeah, I'm just playing some random stuff, doing some grinding. Warframe's a perfect game that's like, if you want to put on podcasts in the background. I listen to the Nordic Model podcast while playing in the background while playing Warframe.
I've heard great things about it. Oh, you're playing right now. That's sick.
I mean, you know
Nice.
what I do. You know what I do. Actually, is I play it at 1.5 times speed, so I can play more episodes per times that I play games. Oh yeah, go for
Yeah, I'm
it.
gonna pop it. Yeah, this is for 1K. Thank everybody for 1K.
Woo!
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Let's
If we ever get to 100, then we'll actually get some real champagne.
excuse the noise.
Nothing broke. Good.
Yay!
We're good.
And the cat is just mildly scared.
Pourquoi?
Oh,
Oh.
thanks.
Oh.
Well, I'll put it
yeah,
aside for you. Your hands are a little busy.
My hands are pink. So,
I mean,
For you?
look at me, just at the hair salon, getting bubbly.
right?
I am a fancy bitch.
Yeah, it's like you're at those fancy, like, $100 a haircut hair salon that comes with
Cheers.
fancy
Cheers.
coffee or
Nice.
champagne.
This is, it's a little sweet.
This is the life. Maybe I should become a streamer like full time.
Oh yeah.
Ed, I don't want to lose you. Please.
No, I would never. I
Honestly,
would never.
I'm really considering getting implants so I can become a titty streamer.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
I love
feel like-
those.
Of course.
I feel like there isn't a. I feel like as a man with tits, like being a big titty streamer, I will be like hitting a very niche market that isn't being met anywhere else.
Are you gonna show feet?
Please don't. Have you ever been on a stream, Keeks? Like, have you ever like gone on to like debate somebody on a stream?
No,
Have you ever
absolutely
committed my
not.
mistakes?
Weren't you just on one with Vosh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. God, that was bad. That was like my performance was really not good.
I was gonna ask. I'm like, I don't know how I would hold up. I think I would start sweating. I would be stumbling over my words. Like, it wouldn't be good.
Honestly, I feel like in terms of like being nervous or stumbling, I feel like I did pretty well. But it was right after I had gotten off work and I had a splitting headache. And it's
Ooh.
just like
Yeah, blame it
was,
on the
like,
headache.
the
yeah.
worst possible fucking conditions.
No, no, I think you'd be good in a stream. I don't think you'd stumble and sweat too much. I think, especially when we're doing the when we did the podcast too. I think you were like pretty good, and
Your blonde is fully pinked out now.
I think yeah. I mean, not saying that you should be a streamer, but I would not hesitate going on a stream if I was you.
Oh, Peep and Sheep asks, "What is our favorite complex analysis theorem?"
I don't know
Those
what
sounds like
those
nerd
mean.
words.
This is like almost a question I can answer, but I'm not that into complex analysis, sadly.
What is your closest kind of analog to it? Like, what is your favorite ersatz complex analysis theorem?
Yeah. What am I doing? Oh, that's what I'm doing.
That's good
Where's my
champagne.
phone?
Yeah.
What's not even champagne? It's
It's good bubbly.
it's good bubbler. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good bubbly.
It's only like 6.5% too. So it's like drinking water.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of water do you drink?
Montreal water. It's
Montreal water.
That's
Montreal
true.
water, good. I don't know what that means.
Put a timer for your phone.
It means that we're such drunkards over here that even our water's boozy.
Woo!
yeah, great city
Okay,
though.
okay.
You would love Montreal, Keeks. It's got the Montreal's got some of the cheapest electricity prices in all of North America. And it's because a state-owned enterprise runs it, and it's 99% renewable, and
Awesome.
it's all
Yeah,
hydropower.
I think I heard one of you talk about that before. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fantastic. We're very pro SOE over here, and I want to do more. I want to do podcasts on state-owned enterprises, but I don't really know like who I could get on for that. But I think it'd be a cool topic to explore.
Yeah, I was also thinking about like maybe doing more civil planning stuff
Mm.
because that's something that there's a lot of interest for, and that like there's a lot of policy that plays into making a functioning city happen and creating a like good quality of life for its inhabitants, and then that also plays for the surrounding areas and the population at large.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Cheers, love. Can I take this off?
Yeah.
Cool.
I shouldn't be.
Yeah, is this the
there
first
shouldn't
time you've
be
ever
pink
dyed your hair?
wrapping at this point.
No. This is the first time that I do it at home. I've had it dyed before at a salon. It was like silver.
I did my
Ooh.
own.
Yeah.
Keeks, I mean, you've got pink highlights, right?
There's not a lot of pink left in my hair, so my hair was pink for a while. I think it is in my like profile picture on Steam and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And on Medium.
Yeah.
But yeah. Then I wanted to change it to be half red and half black because I saw someone on TikTok do it. And also there's a great Jacobin article called "The Red and the Black" about.
No, I'm not
Uh,
capable of doing the knot, can you?
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned out blue and blonde. I was like, whoops. So no, my hair at this point is not really pink. I do need to get it rebleached.
Bow or something.
Yeah, are you gonna
Have
go?
it.
You're gonna go with pink again, or is there a new color that's caught your fancy?
You know, I want to go through like all the major colors. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do like a green next. We wanted to do green,
What shade of green are you going for?
like a darker green.
And mint.
Mm.
I cannot relate.
Yeah.
Dark.
Balding at 18 was a very traumatic experience
Like
for me.
emerald?
That sucks.
Emerald green?
Yeah, no, I
That'd be good.
can't see it right now, but my hair is below shoulder length now.
Really?
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be blessed with a family that keeps their hair around.
Rub it in. Why don't you?
Hey,
Yeah.
did you know that my
Well,
Sid,
my
did you
hair is
know?
really long and it's like really nice to run my fingers through, and it's like it looks so good. And
Oh yeah. Thanks, man. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it. No, I can't. No, I can't even imagine what it's like at shoulder length. Because I mean, all the pictures I've seen of you is like always Oh, it's kind of longish for sure, but it's not like shoulder length. But that must be that's nuts. I mean,
Yeah,
can you even do highlights at that point, or is it just like a little
Well,
gradient?
I usually dye my hair. I usually dye my hair all at once, and then it just ends up kind of like sometimes fades or grows in unevenly. So like
Mm.
it looks like I did something fancier to it than I actually did.
Yeah.
You know, like right now it's like part blonde and part teal and part brown, and that's just because some of the dye faded and some of it, some of my hair grew in.
Wait, so Salmon Variety asked, what are your thoughts on white Jewish
Twitter.
Jewish Twitter?
I think it's fucking stupid. I don't,
I don't know what that is. I engage with the
It's-
parts of Twitter that I enjoy engaging with, and then the rest of it can fuck off.
it's It's basically North Korea Twitter. They're
Oh.
white people that really Jewish Twitter.
That sounds like really a lot of fun for me to just act like a dick to and be a massive troll, but I try to avoid doing that.
What's your thoughts on Jewish Twitter, Keegs?
I don't know what that means.
It's
I
literally
think-
it's literally like people with DPRK flags on their.
I think at this point, oh my god,
You don't grab your own yourself.
I've blocked so many people on Twitter that like there's just entire discourses and groups of people that I just miss because so many people are blocked.
Mm.
I might be about to die. Don't judge me.
Okay. What are our thoughts on nonviolence / pacifism?
Well, I'm a big fan of Rosa Luxemburg. I have social reform or revolution right here.
Very nice. Very
And
nice.
I think that pacifism is a good method of approach at first, and we should only commit violence if violence is being committed upon us. Also, just from a purely utilitarian perspective, if we're trying to be a popular movement, then optics matter a lot, and being the aggressor or the perceived aggressor doesn't work very well in those contexts. So,
What about you, Keegs?
Yeah. I think it's important to emphasize on that point that like people. Well, I'm not going to speak to like all other countries or anything, but in the U.S. at least, I think it's pretty well established that people don't respond well to a movement being seen as violent.
Mm-hmm.
That's why MLK did a lot of the strategies he did was to be nonviolent, so you basically looked more sympathetic to moderates or people who hadn't made up their mind yet.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that is pretty effective. I
Wow.
also
bisexual
I was just
lighting
thinking
turned
I was
on.
just thinking the other day about how
Mhm.
I read Luxemburg's Reform and Revolution, and I'm like, yeah, so reform, that's the right answer then, is what I got now.
Yeah, of course.
It's
Well, I think it's all about how you view how a revolution can happen. What is a revolution? I believe one of our very smart contributors did a piece on that, didn't he?
yeah,
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
very very intelligent, handsome too.
Many such cases. Many people are saying this.
Um,
But yeah, I think that's like essentially it's just if you're trying to create a grassroots movement, engaging in behavior that will drive people away is probably a bad thing, because
Yeah.
grassroots movement need mass appeal so as to have as much of the grass and as much of the root.
that
So-
as much as the grass and the root. Wow,
A poet among
it
us.
works. I mean, the metaphor
I mean,
works. Yeah.
it's the French in me.
No, I mean, well, for what I think about pacifism, I mean, my username on Twitter is Lil Baby Gandhi, so I think you can ascertain my thoughts on pacifism.
So
from
you're
that.
racist.
Oh yeah, huge racist.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I think that kind of civil disobedience / pacifism movement was a great mobilizing force for a bunch of people, and I think it was a very important cornerstone in the history of India. And I'm always pro pacifism. I think that's the way to go. I'm always pro reform. That's kind of why I started this project, is to get away from the kind of delusions that we see online about a revolution where we just kill and eat a bunch of rich people. I think that's very insane.
Well, I just don't think that the rich are a sustainable, source of food if we're trying to shrink.
We're not.
if we're trying to shrink.
What are you talking about,
the
man?
wealth? If we're trying to like shrink the rich as a class, then it's not going to be sustainable long term. We need to find a different people to sustain ourselves on.
Okay. We got another question from Ambient.
Literally as a food source. I'm like, no, that's true too. I mean, eventually you run out of rich people.
At some point, you just run out of rich people. You need to find
right.
You need to you need to like
sustainability.
counter redistribute the wealth to create more rich people. So then that way you have food again.
This is it's a great Matt. It's part of a great Matt Brunig article, and he talks about how we can make tax systems more progressive by just giving like all the market income to rich people, and then taxing them back at really high rates and redistributing it. And that would be tax progressivity. But obviously, that's an insane way to run a society. But anyway, we have another question. What is your channel built around? What is your channel's broad ideology? Social democracy with socialist ambitions?
We've never
what do you guys?
We've never really discussed
Channel's
that.
ideology is the Nordic.
Yeah. We want post 1990 Sweden, but no, I'm just kidding.
No, I would like.
I think it's fair to say that we're all socialists, right? Like I think
that pretty much all of our
but-
members. I think that pretty much of our like main members,
Yeah.
are democratic socialists, and so social democracy is about a lot more like a means to an end, and then to just like socialism to a lot of people is a means to an end. So, Salman.
Well, I mean, what about-
what are your thoughts about Juche Twitter? Like again, we don't have any thoughts about that.
I don't really care. But no, would you call yourself a socialist, Keith?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Me too.
I mean, it's been calling myself a socialist. I put in and out of my bio. It really, like, to myself, I call myself a social democrat because that's my strand of socialism.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's confusing for reasons everybody knows about.
Yeah.
So I just call myself a socialist directly. But yeah, I will say I'm a socialist first and a social democrat second. And if somebody proved to me that social democracy wasn't the right way or something, I would become a different kind of socialist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you feel like
Not
draws
that
you
question.
to socialism?
But, well, sorry, Salman.
one
we
second,
don't
let him-
see any different questions in chat. So if you could drop that in again, and then we can answer it. Thanks.
But like, circling back, like, Keith, like, what is your, if you're talking to just an average person, right? Like somebody who's not particularly politically involved, what do you find is your, like, if you had to make a case for socialism, like, what do you usually find yourself going with?
Well, and this is kind of similar to the first thing I drew into it. I think if you're talking to a normie, I mean, the first thing you talk about is which is kind of more pretty popular, is about worker ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have an understanding of like the exploitation of boss-employer relationships, and people are very accepting of the idea that like should people who work at the workplace generally control it, and people are generally like, yeah, they should. I think that's kind of like, I won't say it's like the same as a lot of American work ethic stuff and stuff like that, but it's very compatible with that. The idea that like you should take pride in and control your work and stuff like that. And I think that's very much compatible with worker ownership. And you just talk about, I mean, this is the Matt Brunig has it's a Matt Brunig article. It's UBI already exists. We just need to redistribute it. That a large section of society's income is capital income, meaning it goes to people for doing nothing and just collect the income.
Yeah.
And that's like, once you phrase it that way, which I think a lot of people don't think of it that way, and as soon as you say it to them, they're like, oh, well, yeah, that is what that is. And
sorry, just trying to
add
chat on call.
yeah.
Oh, there it is.
There he is.
What am I doing?
All right, chat back on call. Keegs, if you want to keep on streaming, I think you can add it back.
Oh, I gotta add it back. Yeah, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Hey man, how's it going?
Hello.
Going well.
Yeah?
I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay. Is your Discord working okay now?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I guess same question to you. What is your main argument for convincing a normie about socialism? I guess.
That's a good question. I think probably the best arguments for normies would center around democracy, and so you'd want to say something like, it's sort of the standard like co-op stuff, even if co-ops aren't necessarily like the worker co-ops aren't necessarily like my main thing. You sort of say, hey, we live in a democracy, and yet we spend whatever, 40 hours a week or more or less, whatever, however much you work, 40 hours a week on average, in a, completely authoritarian environment, right? So, when, if you want to talk about like their specific job, you'd say things like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that like, by virtue of your job that your manager doesn't know, right? Don't you think that your firm might work better if workers had more of a say in their workplace, because you have knowledge that your managers don't, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually an important point in terms of like policy design too. Is like, beyond the fact that like, okay, yeah, bosses can be very exploitative and all that. Like, actually, just workers know a lot of stuff that higher ups won't, and that's why it's important to get workers or unions involved in running firms and also running like sectors of industry too. Like they know stuff about the ins and outs of industry that the higher ups are not going to know.
Yeah. I think that the way that I try to advocate for it, the way that I try to advocate for it usually is I don't really try to even use the word socialist, really. I try to push for certain ideas that I know are relevant to the lives of the people that I'm talking to. Like I come from a place that it was essentially like elevated from poverty through like the establishment of a very strong welfare state, and then there was also like a culture of power of worker empowerment that created a vast networks of lots of different co-ops and also consumer co-ops. So really, we already have kind of a concept of worker management and of cooperative ownership that's been established, and also a bit of a favorable view of the welfare state. So those are the things that I try and elevate of kind of promoting to people and try and point to like, hey, look at all of the good things that we accomplished by doing those things. What if we did more of it? What if we went further? Imagine all the things that we could accomplish even more.
About the Nordic kitty.
The Nordic kitty.
One of the other things that I try to, it is specifically to social wealth funds, that I try to bring up, is basically you sort of exploit the notion, which is not in general true, right? But the idea that people have that governments are like households, and you try to say like, well, households save by investing, right? The government could do that too, and then also it's a way to sell sort of. This is a way for the government to get revenue without having to tax anybody. And if people don't like taxes, right, in general, not everyone is as tax positive as we are.
Yeah.
And so you say like, this is a way for the government to get revenue far into the future to fund whatever we want to do, and we don't have to tax anybody.
Yeah, I think there's some in the American context specifically. I think there's something to be said for, basically tricks of government programs you can run that don't require tax increases, like or stuff like state investment banks and things like that. That is like, oh well, it doesn't make the deficit number go up, so it's good, which is that isn't really a coherent analysis, but I mean it convinces people, so I guess that works.
A lot of people will say like, oh well, if it comes at no cost, then why not, right? People like free things, and so if you give them the idea that it comes without cost, then they'll be a lot more in favor of it, just intuitively. I also think that what Ambient Wave says about like how the Vanguard model of getting a left-wing leader to transform a political party and the state from top to bottom doesn't work.
You need to rinse your hair.
I think that I'll do it in a second. It's just that I think that it's important to engage in electoral politics so as to get people in place that are favorable to our left-wing views and that are willing to implement the policies that would benefit our causes. But there is no doubt that acting outside of electoralism, acting outside of party politics is mandatory. We cannot afford to just rely on one form of institution and one form of advocacy. Every tool in our arsenal is vital. And with that,
I also I don't want to make it.
hair.
I don't want to make it sound like the arguments that I brought up are dishonest. They're not really dishonest. I mean, it's true, right? That it's a way to raise revenue without taxing. I think that's actually a good, like, I think there's a huge, like, political economy benefit from that, right? It's like an ever increasing capital gains tax. If you at least if you have a fund that like reinvests a significant amount of its returns, right, in this like capital gains tax that increases every year, without any of the distortions that capital gains taxes have. So like it's true, and I think there's like definite political economy benefits from that. It's what, but I think that like choosing which arguments you use based on where people are, I don't think that there's like a dishonesty in that, even if you don't think that's the strongest argument or the most cohesive one. As long as it's true, right? As long as it's a good argument, tailoring it to a specific person, I don't think it's dishonest.
No, I think that it's almost necessary. Even I mean, I think part of the reason why the right is so successful, it seems to kind of tailor itself to the zeitgeist of whatever is going on right now in the immediate movement. I think we need to do a better job of that rather than kind of hearkening back to what happened historically, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. Okay, what was the next question? Okay, no, we didn't have a next question. One thing I want to talk to you guys about is we talk about social wealth funds a lot on this channel and just generally, but another part of kind of controlling how a firm interacts in a market economy is controlling the debt portion of it, and not just the equity. What kind of stuff do you guys foresee in terms of a kind of nationalized banking system, something that funds firms outside of just equity?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to write up something about Nathan Tankis's report, aren't I?
I'd love to
It's
hear
actually
about.
something I'm curious about too, because I don't have a strong idea about this. It's something that I've been interested in, been wanting to look into, but it's something that I know a lot about. So
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we always talk about equity value of whole lot, which is important, but then we forget about the other half, which is just the debt funded portion, the portion of a company. And if we want to have truly kind of democratic control of investment, it also means having democratic kind of control over the lending practices of a nation.
Right.
So we can
and this is
sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh, actually, I think I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No worries. Go ahead.
This is something I know that in David Schweikard's book, After Capitalism, this is like one of the sort of like central features of his model. Are these sort of these like democratically controlled investment banks? He sets up this like federalized system, where you have a sort of a national investment bank that sets apart some amount of money, some portion of its funds for like national level projects, and then divvies the remaining up among and sends the rest to state level banks who do the same. They take a portion and use this for lending for like statewide kind of projects, and then divvy the rest up to local level banks, which would fund kind of like businesses, right? Would lend to businesses and do these sorts of things. And all this money is coming from in Schweikard's model. He sort of his model is a worker co-op based one, but he runs into kind of runs into the Marx ratio kind of problem that Matt Bruenig has written about and such. And so he sort of like pseudo emulates a social wealth fund by instituting a capital assets tax on firms. And so this is this money that's raised via this tax goes back and funds the lending. Is the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if
I'll
we,
scoot over so you can.
I guess if we live in like a really kind of socialist economy, the delineation between equity and debt kind of
I'll go there.
starts to
I'll take-
blur, I think.
and
And
we've got
you know,
the- we've got
I
the
stop
left, the right, and-
seeing much of a difference between them. To me, if ideally we lived in the kind of economy that all of us want to see, the difference between debt and equity is just kind of negligible. I mean, if
Why do you say that?
I mean, like, okay, like in terms of debt for a firm, what is it? It's just like it's a bond that you pay back over time. You pay coupon payments, and then you pay off the payment of a bond. For equity, it's you kind of grow the size of the firm to return cash flows from whatever assets that you own to the investors. And I think at the end of the day, if we lived in a kind of economy where all of this investment was totally under democratic and social control, sorry. I don't.
Just in your fist.
I don't see why we'd prefer one over the other. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately a thing of like, there's subtle, complex reasons why you would want to use, some financial instruments sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and others other times, and it like, I don't think they're going to be, we have to make sure to actually get democratic control of that entire complex financial system.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not like we're going to inherently favor one way of. My Discord notifications are still showing up. That's my bad. And it's not like we're going to inherently prefer one way of doing it over the other.
Yeah.
One thing I think is important to mention, and this is something in Tankis's report that I thought was. Tankis's? That doesn't sound right. Anyways, his report that I thought was important was that ultimately, the federal government is the one who has control over money creation. It's just that in today's economy, we generally kind of contract that out to private banks. The vast majority of money created is in bank deposits. And private banks get to do it, but they only get to do it because we basically give them a license to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, like, it's not like that's some inherently natural way to run a monetary system. We can choose to set up the rules differently if we want to.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's something important to keep in mind.
Are you becoming more and more MMT pill? Do you feel?
Yeah, I'm gonna start getting into arguments with people, other social democrats, I think, on Twitter. Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, I think that's fine. I guess. I mean, I guess what do you find is like the salient kind of point that MMT makes, that is just like separate from what bog standard Keynesianism was saying.
Well, actually, Keynes was a couple things here. One was a lot of the people who call themselves Keynesians were not particularly Keynesian, and they didn't. There's a Alex Williams, who's like my favorite writer, on economics at least. In his series on Keynes's general theory, he points out that there's Keynesian methodology and there's Keynesian like policy prescriptions, right? Like there's a Keynesian way you can look at and talk about the economy, and then there's the stuff Keynes wanted to do. And there's a lot of people who kind of ignored Keynes's methodology and just were like, yeah, we should do deficit spending, and like that kind of missed a lot of the point. So I think all of that being said, a lot of MMT stuff is more in line with the way Keynes actually thought about things, and not just like, I'm going to ignore that Keynes said that investment creates savings and that the economy will never naturally go to full employment, and just say we should do deficit spending during recessions. That's not really what Keynes was saying at all. And yeah, I think the other salient point MMT makes is Keynes is actually, it's kind of debated what like Keynes's theory of money was, and I haven't done enough reading to have like a particularly strong opinion on it. But in some places, at least, he assumes money is is the correct pronunciation exogenous? Yeah, exogenous.
Yeah.
Whereas post Keynesians, MMTers included, think it's endogenous, meaning it's much money the money supply is just a function of what happens in the banking system mainly. It's not set by the Federal Reserve or anything. And yeah, I think MMT is clear on that point, and they're basically right about that. I may or may not have some quibbles around the edges. I'm still reading. It's funny actually. I think the main contention I have with MMTers is like I'm not entirely convinced about their point that and this is an interesting point they make, and there's something to that like the U.S. dollar it is accepted and used in this country because it's the thing used to pay taxes and like pay fines and stuff like that. Like the legal establishment that like, oh, you have to pay this stuff in dollars means everyone's like, well, I guess I'll use dollars then. There is something to that. That's definitely part of the reason, but I don't think that like entirely explains why people adopt a particular currency. But yeah, a lot of the other main points I basically agree with. Yeah, there's a great again, this is a Nathan Tankus and Rohan Gray, I think I want to say is his name. I have an article from 2018 where they're talking about like the MMT approach to inflation, right? And it's crazy how they have a couple paragraphs in there that like literally described exactly what's happening right now, which is that like, oh, like if you actually get demand high enough, you're going to start hitting bottlenecks in specific sectors that are going to drive up inflation, and like shortages will start to happen in places, and that'll drive prices up. It's like, oh, that's exactly what happened. And I think yeah, at the very least, I'm increasingly agreeing with more academic MMT work. I think there are a lot of random people who call themselves MMTers on Twitter who don't have a particularly deep knowledge about that. And like, yeah, it's like you can yell at somebody a whole bunch about how like deficit spending or about how like oh, taxes don't finance spending, right? But like that's kind of a semantic debate at the end of the day, and like the actual interesting points of like, oh, like I said, the government ultimately controls money creation, or there's non-fiscal ways to you don't have to use taxes necessarily to pay for new programs. You can restrict lending in certain sectors, for example. And like that stuff is actually interesting, and I agree with a lot. The kind of problem is there's just a lot of people having semantic debates and talking over each other rather than talking about those actually interesting policy prescriptions. And one more thing, it does remind me of the fact that like one of the things that drew me to social democracy was like it's an ideology that stops being about like just kind of arguing about theory and people arguing what these particular words mean or what a certain writer meant when they said this, or like how a totally theoretical society would be run. And it's like, no, let's actually talk about the policy we're going to do and what's the policy going to be. And that just clarifies so much thinking to actually just say like, what are the policies you're going to pass now? Yeah, a lot of discourse on Twitter.
I feel like that's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, I feel
No,
like
it's fine, I
there's
just talked a
something
lot.
that kind of appeals to me about social democracy, that I feel like that's something that social democracy does that other ideologies should do, and it's that it focuses on the how and not just the what.
Right.
And so when you look at how you let's say you radicalize somebody, right? They've gone from being let's say a liberal to a socialist. Now they want to abolish capitalism and replace it with socialism, and they want to redistribute ownership across the entire society so that now it's social ownership, and they don't know how to go about it. They're going from a point that's like they're going from a current point that's so far away from where they want to go, and they have no real points as to like what to do in the immediate to get closer to that end goal. And I feel like policy work and policy discussions help point out those little steps. And if there's any way of really explaining it in a way that can really be understood by the average person, is just try and picture weight loss, right? Let's say you're overweight, you want to lose weight. How do you have one long-term goal, but a lot of the time it's, if you really want to motivate yourself, it's you have to focus yourself on specific ways to improve your diet, specific ways to improve, how healthy your life is, so as to help you get to a healthier weight. And you also need to set yourself shorter term goals. You need to essentially make yourself a progression path. And without that path, it's very easy for people to lose their way. And I feel like for certain socialists, that's kind of what ends up happening, is that they succumb to doomerism because they don't really see a way forward, specifically because no one's really showed them how to set themselves a path.
Right. Well, I think too, and that's like a mental illness thing too, right? Is like you can't, if like I have pretty bad anxiety, and like just saying, oh, I should stop being anxious, I should get better, is not helpful and just kind of makes you feel bad. Like you need to develop an actual plan on how to get there, and that will make you feel not hopeless.
There's a sense of empowerment in knowing what you have to do.
Right. Having an actual, not just where you want to go, but an actual plan on how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although on the other side, I will say it's frustrating that getting there takes so long, right? And like progress is so slow, and sometimes history's not a line. It doesn't always advance. All the time. Sometimes there's big steps back. I totally get that's very frustrating.
I mean, I guess one of the questions, and I asked this to Pelle Draxid, who's a Danish MP who we're doing, ex-MP that we're doing a great interview with. They'll be out soon. But it was one of the things is how do we kind of reconcile the fact that we do work towards an ideology that we won't actually see tangibly enacted in our future.
Right.
But still kind of have the energy within us to keep going for it. Like, how do you guys do it?
I mean, that's essentially, I think, what I've laid out is that you focus on the small victories on the path towards the great one, and you take a sense of accomplishment in those small victories.
But these guys are American, and they don't get to see even the small political victories. Like, how do you guys keep fucking guys keep going for it?
Things actually happen in your country.
Yeah.
No, the things happening in our country aren't always that great, but
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Your Senate is appropriately cucked. If you're gonna have a Senate, it should be as cucked as the Canadian Senate, where they just sort of sign off on
Senate
things.
our Senate is not even elected. Come on.
No, but it's totally cucked.
They basically just sign off on everything, right? Like they don't actually put up meaningful. Maybe there's like some soft power being some soft kind of pressure being put on, like the House or whatever, or your equivalent of the House, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But my understanding is that the Canadian Senate basically just signs off on everything. So this is the appropriate. If we need to have this ornamental whatever, like vestigial structure, at least it should be appropriately cut. Just
this
pass
is
whatever
essentially why I keep on calling for abolishing the Senate. It is such a useless institution that no one ever bothers even mentioning it.
But I mean, I guess you guys, it's inescapable for you guys. It's just like kind of there. And it's gonna be there for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the Senate is really just a waste of money.
Yeah, it's a total waste of money. It's just something that rubber stamps whatever bill's gonna go through the House of Commons.
Yeah,
I don't really know.
Go through the Governor General just so that the Queen has her stamp on it.
Yeah, sorry, you were saying, Chad?
I don't really know what like the sort of path forward in the United States looks like given our political institutions, because at the end of the day, if we want like this like big major changes, like our institutions aren't built for that, and so at some level, like the institutions have to change either de facto or de jure. That they have to change like we have to weaken the Senate in some way, or just like through norms, and kind of the way that the Canadian Senate is weak. Through norms. But this, to me, seems like a prerequisite for doing like most meaningful things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the hard thing is that like, really big changes require the weight of the federal government behind them, especially, well, and this is always important to mention in these discussions. States can't, there may be one or two exceptions, but states can't really deficit spend in the U.S. literally constitutionally barred from doing so, which is a massive restraint on like actually committing, actually getting any progressive goals, because you can't even do stuff on the on the state level. And then the federal government is between the gerrymandering and the Senate and the general racism of the American public. Very hard to get anything done there either. So for me at least, it's what I've done more is like when you're in a state like this where no matter what kind of progressive area you focus on, it's gonna be frustrating. You should try to focus on where you feel like you can actually make some kind of impact, and the stuff that you're most interested in. So like I could spend all day, I don't know, doing like urban policy or something like that, and like that stuff is important, but I'm not really interested in it. So the defeats are going to be all the more disheartening, because I'm like, well, like this sucks. I did all that work, didn't really like it, and nothing happened. So yeah, it's important to focus on the stuff you can change, and we also shouldn't underestimate that like calling state senators and stuff like that actually can have a pretty big impact on policy change, because nobody does that. And that gives you an outsized voice in a lot of those things if you just write a senator and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, going to the smaller branches of government where your elected officials are a lot more accessible just by virtue of having to represent a fewer number of constituents, it usually tends to have your voice heard by those representatives.
Represents less constituents, and then like people also pay way less attention to them in the first place. So you have that much.
Why one of the best forms of advocacy is actually just showing the fucking city council meetings. If you're wanting to focus on the local level, who shows up to city council meetings? Bored retirees. Like, you need to be able to as a leftist, to just show up. If you have any kind of vacation days, take one of your vacation days and dedicate it to showing up to a freaking city council meeting.
Right.
To DSA's credit, this is something that, like, focusing on stuff at the local level has been something that it's sort of been a part of their, well, to the extent that DSA has a strategy, of course, it's a very decentral org, but certainly it seems to have been a focus broadly of getting people elected to local offices and these sorts of things, which there people focus on like the few that are in national that are in the House, right? The 4, I think, DSA members that are in the House, and that's huge, right? It's huge to have socialist Congress members for the first time in whatever it is, 100 years. But I think they've rightly been focusing a lot more on getting people elected at the local level, which you hope turns dividends over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think that like focusing on one key area we can implement more change is very important, because the reality is that when one state implements a very beneficial change, that creates echoes, that creates ripples. The other states surrounding it notice. When we talk about like healthcare in Canada, it didn't happen just because the federal government made it happen one day out of the blue. No, it happened because one province did it, and then another province followed, and then there were calls to make it national, to make it countrywide, and that's how we ended up getting free healthcare federally. It's because a lot of political will was channeled on the provincial side first.
Yeah, and there is room in blue states at least to start try moving us towards single payer on the state level at least, and I think that there is a path to that, because like actually at the end of the day, it's not like something this is like that the rich are united in their opposition to single payer. A lot of businesses would like there to be single payer so they don't have to deal with it, and like a lot of them will actually probably end up paying less to such a system. And so I think there's definitely room to try that stuff, in California, New York, places like
absolutely.
that.
I guess businesses should not be in the. I guess firms, insofar as they're not insurance firms, should not be in the business of choosing insurance plans. I mean, that's not an optimal way to run a business. That's something you have no idea how to do as a business. Anyway, Otter is here. Hey, Otter, how you doing?
And the myth, the legend. Oh my god.
Hey, how's it going, buddy?
Pretty good. I just came back from walking in my local park, so that was fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Yeah, no, we're really excited to have you here. We were just talking about MMT. So if you have any opinions, I know we had a little bit of a disagreement on it back when we recorded the podcast, but yeah, what I guess what are your thoughts in general on that?
I'm not gonna lie, guys. I haven't finished your podcast yet. I got like halfway through it and I got distracted by something.
The post Keynesian one? Oh, it's I think it's one of my favorite episodes, to be honest.
I was enjoying it, but then like I
It's-
think I went and played Mass Effect.
It's so good.
Gotta say, it's a good episode. When I edit it, I've listened to it about like 3 or 4 times already through the process, and I still bother like listening to the finished version post release.
it's very dense because it's like you have to be like really interested in like economic theory or policy or whatever to like listen to. But I think it's one of my favorite ones that I've done so far. But anyway, I cut you off. Sorry, what were you saying?
So yeah, about the question, is MMT, or I should say, the opinions on MMT. So personally, I haven't been like much interested in MMT policy because, for one, well, you have some like so-called Twitter MMTers that just ruin it all for the most part, and two, myself, I'm not really interested in MMT like policy wise because of my own policies tend to be more like social democratic or like more like towards like the Rudolf Minor kind. And so in that sense, I'm not too interested in their policy wise, but theoretical wise, I do think that they have started the push towards conceiving a more like pluralistic approach to economic theory, because previously a lot of economic theory was, okay, you got to have the math, okay, you got to have statistics, okay, you got to have like computer programming skills and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas I try to think of economics as sort of like a social science. So in that fashion, you should try to like incorporate elements from other fields, so like sociology or law. And I think that's particularly good in the case of like, I heard Rohan Gray or even Nathan Tankus was mentioned here too. So I think on that front, MMT is like has done a pretty positive job, as well as like getting itself more relevant in like the public eyes, even though some of their sentiment, so like taxes don't fund spending, like that sort of like sentiment that might turn people off at times. While I do think it might have like sort of like a reactionary sort of like feedback towards that sort of sentiment, I do think that trying to gain more relevance in the views of the public is definitely important, not just for like MMTers, but also for like more like econ theory wise. So like myself being like a post Keynesian, I do think that's a good job made by MMT. So overall, I do think that MMT is like pretty positive on those two fronts. As for policy, I can't say too much about that.
No, it's good. It's yeah. No, I mean, I think we had a little disagreement on this on the podcast too, but I think I've certainly grown more receptive to what they've been saying. But I think on one hand, it's just that I don't fully understand what MMT is about, and that's that's my own problem that I have to read up more about. But I mean, it certainly to me it seems like they're on the left, or at least left leaning, and
Not necessarily though, right? Like, it isn't MMT kind of? I mean, like MMT. I think at least I forget which one of the kind of major authors meant to say that, or said like MMT is kind of a sort of neutral description, right? It's like it's a nonpartisan description of the world, and you can take less policy away from these descriptive statements, or you could take right-wing policy
in the
from
US
these descriptive statements.
are left wing, but like in Australia,
Mhm.
I think it's Bill Mitchell, right? Is the one that's from
Bill
could be
Mitchell's the Australian one, right?
from
Yeah.
Australia. Yeah, and he's a piece of shithead. So
So
yeah, I think there's actually a broader point about like I mean heterodox economics in general, sure, but post Keynesianism too. About I think maybe Otter mentioned this at some point, is that like you can adopt a post Keynesian views of things and still be right wing. I think it's a lot harder to do, but it's still possible, because like for example, post Keynesian ideas are compatible with the idea that like actually you should be trying to jack up the profits that companies make, because then they will, if investment is dependent on profit rates, you want to jack up profit rates and then have a lot of investment, and that'll do a lot of growth. That's still a post-Keynesian approach, talking about how growth is demand determined and investment creates savings, but that's still a right-wing policy prescription at the end of the day. So yeah, and I think that's probably true of MMT too. There are left-wing and right-wing people in it.
But I feel like I generally find them more receptive to the left than other strands of economics, which are verifiably psychopathic in my opinion.
That's a good phrase, verifiably psychopathic. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm like, I don't know very much about an MMT. What other than like the sort of the branding, right? Which is like, we you don't need taxes to fund spending, but then then you can use taxes, or at least this is the line, right? That's in the public, right? I don't know whether the real MMT theoreticians say this, but like, the line is like, well, then you need the taxes to control inflation or something. How does MMT differ from like what does MMT add over like post-Keynesian stuff? And what is it aside from, again, which you mentioned, you called it as like a semantic distinction earlier, which I tend to kind of agree with. It seems a little bit silly, like at least in terms of like the policy implications of that distinction. I don't really understand. So I guess how does MMT differ from just like PK stuff in general, and what is it?
Sid, did you and I have this discussion before Chad got here? Didn't we?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think so, but I mean, I feel like it's good that Otter's here, because I think he can answer that question better than either of us.
Yeah. But before we do that, there was actually like a question from one of the chatters that we never really got around to addressing. And it was, what are your goals for your channel going to the future? That's like,
give into the system, make bank, become capitalist apologist. No.
I
feel like the goal at the end of the day, it really is selling out.
I want a high valuation. I want to sell my share in this cooperative firm, and I want to make a big bank, and I want to dip.
It's all about the guala.
Yeah, it's all about the guala.
My goal is to become a contributor to the Jimmy Dore show.
Oh, exactly.
Absolutely.
But no, I'm really,
I actually really want to like lick Jason Hinkle's boots. Jackson.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't care about his name. He doesn't need to talk. He doesn't even need to be a human being at this point.
Yeah, Jackson Hinkle, come on the Nordic model. But no, anyway, I think I'm most excited this year for Chad's gonna be talking to on Learning Economics at time TBD, and that's gonna be whenever that happens. But I'm really excited for that one coming up next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually like in terms of like how we want our content to redirect in the future. I feel like at the beginning we were very centered around the podcast. Now it feels like our focus has really switched to the shorts, and we've noticed with our first Chud Logic stream that streams tend to be pretty good when it comes to doing long form content and gathering a moderately better amount of attention and engagement. So we'll maybe try and shift the podcast in maybe a more live fashion, just to kind of integrate those two together. It seems like so far our future really is on the shorts and trying to diversify our platforms across not just YouTube, but like also like with TikTok, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all of it. That's really pretty much it. I feel like we're trying to we've found a bit of a footing right now. We're just trying to polish.
I'm just waiting for Chad to do TikToks. That's all I'm here for.
Yeah.
They would love you, Chad.
It's like the handsome white men on TikTok. They always do better because of the racist algorithm. It's
right.
If racism is going to exist, then we need to capitalize on it.
I think you just summed up like the history of capitalism in America.
Yeah.
One thing that I would like to, unfortunately, I've been swamped with school stuff recently, but one thing that but with respect to the shorts, something that I think is just missing, in sort of like the, I don't know, the zeitgeist is a YouTube channel that takes, that like a sort of leftist policy focused, YouTube channel, right? There are like all these video essayists that do a bunch of stuff. But there really isn't, basically kind of a video version of like what the People's Policy Project is. Like even I think there's value even in just like translating existing points, and even if you added nothing, which I think you can do. I think you can add new things, but even if you added nothing, like just sort of the arbitrage of taking these ideas that exist out there, and putting them in video form, which is a form a lot of people seem to like. I think it'd be huge. There's no one in the space doing video content that relates to kind of like social democratic leftist policy kind of stuff, which is something that I would have loved to have been there, a few years ago or something.
If UE is listening to the stream, he's gonna be insulted.
Oh, that's true. Well, yeah, that's right. Well, UE is would be the one like sort of notable exception, I guess. Although, but even he, I mean, he isn't like totally policy focused, right? I guess he obviously his most recent video is.
No, but I do take your point. It's not like, oh, we got one guy for it, so we're good now.
Right.
Like the people on the left making videos are English and philosophy and media majors, and that stuff's well and good. And I've watched many hour-and-a-half long videos, but it's not the same as kind of a more policy focus. I think like actually the reason I just thought I was a different Warframe for a second there. Like, why isn't my ability working? The reason I got into studying economics in the first place is because like I found that leftists didn't have like a good coherent theory of the economy, and it was kind of hit or miss whether they were actually critiquing mainstream economics in like a way that made sense. And yeah, that's why I got into it in the first place. And I think there's a lot of value in like you can actually the ideas to get into people's heads about like a kind of more heterodox approach to economics. A lot of the ideas aren't that hard. A lot of them are, but I feel like it's totally possible to actually make some content to get some good ideas in people's heads. So yeah, I agree. That's
I feel like also like when it comes to all of the big policy talk, a lot of it is still happening in written form on platforms that are not necessarily where the mass amount of engagement is, and it's important if you want to be listened by the people to go where the people are and speak the language of the people. You need to be able to essentially make yourself as widely marketable as possible in a certain sense. I hate to talk about it in like really kind of like CEO grinded way, but that's kind of what it is.
And there's also a thing of like
because
you have to.
Sorry,
if you want to get popular making like YouTube content or whatever, like you have to make stuff that the algorithm is going to like.
Yeah,
and, like,
that's true. But at the same time, you need to know when to counter the algorithm. Like when we decided to go with the shorts instead of the podcast, the YouTube algorithm loves watch time, and therefore making long form content is the best way of getting long watch time for minimal, for as few videos as possible. But that's not really true, because a lot of people will be like really turned off by seeing a video that's like 45 minutes long. If they wanted to watch a 45-minute long, like essentially like episode of a series, they'd be on Netflix. They wouldn't be on YouTube. So really, the way that the audience on YouTube behaves is still the same as back when YouTube became big. People love short videos. People love just digestible little bits, and when they want long form stuff, they go on Netflix or they go on Twitch, or they find the odd YouTuber that somehow ended up breaking through the fact that most audiences just don't want to be watching just really long form videos. Okay, and at the end of the day, we
how
can't
true
all
is this
be
though?
How true is this?
How true is this, right? Like, I know that, interviews, these make sense, right? Interviews are sort of... Go ahead. Interviews are kind of, if you're not very interested in the topic, interviews are kind of dry.
Yeah.
It seems to me that at least I think like there's the sort of thing where like a lot of YouTube people try to get it like just over the 10-minute mark or something because the algorithm really likes that. But clearly like there are a lot of people who will watch very long videos. And you look at like most of the sort of like the left video essayists, that their videos are very long, are 30 minutes long or something, or even in some cases much longer. I think that like I think that there is something to be said for, you could have longer form, like highly informational content that's cut more like a video essay, and that's more engaging to people. I think that can be more engaging to people who aren't like, as technically, super interested, who would want to listen to like a long form interview with an expert or something. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know how true it is that people like just expressly don't want to watch long form stuff.
Yeah, the thing is like I'm talking about like the online audience of YouTube at large. I'm not just talking about like people who watch political content. And if you look at how like big YouTubers got big, just look at freaking. It's not exactly someone that you should aspire to be, but look at Logan Paul. His videos, were like 4 to 5 minutes.
To be Logan Paul?
That's it. He was entirely
big on a different
all
algorithm,
of it
though,
was
right?
going entirely against the algorithm, and he made up for it by being high energy and through essentially presentation. And that's something that the video essayists that we see right now breaking through are really good at. Like the presentation.
Is that actually true? That
it attracts people in ways that they don't even look at the length.
like, did Logan Paul buck the algorithm? Or I thought, like, wasn't there a change in the algorithm like sometime in like the last couple of years where it really started like prioritizing watch time? I thought this was why you saw like a blow up in the length where like everyone's trying to hit 10 minutes.
Yeah, sorry, it's just the change in watch time actually happened during the boom of gaming content. That's really what happened, and that was before Logan Paul jumped onto the scene because back then Vine still existed.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think generally, this is not something I started to get the most views or whatever. It's just I wanted a kind of centralized space where we could convey the policy points that we wanted as leftists in an accessible manner. And I know the interviews can get dry sometimes, and that's kind of the pitfalls you run into when you have very specific kind of interviews with really knowledgeable people. But I think I do like the format of short content too, because we're able to convey these kind of dense topics with a really underlying complexity to them, but to make them accessible to people who haven't really thought about that before. Because I mean, there's not really a lot of shorts on YouTube about decommodification or full employment, and those are the things that we kind of excel at, and I think that's the kind of content that I want to continue making this year. Just from a purely left perspective, and I think that's our that's our wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's what I think is like people love digestible content. I should have maybe said, and it's very easy to make short content digestible, but also you can make content a lot more digestible through presentation. That's something that video essayists are very good at. But it's not, when we say that it's not just about the views, it's like, it makes me, I've been thinking about this, like the whole concepts that have been brought up ever since like the rise of the right online, of like the marketplace of ideas. And the right portrays this as like, well, the marketplace of ideas makes it so that the best ideas end up on top. And that's just not how markets work. If you look at a market, what products end up on top are going to be the most heavily distributed, the most heavily advertised, the most heavily supported, and they end up being the most widely accessible. And because of that, they end up gaining the most amount of market share. So really, if the left at large wants to be able to combat the right in the marketplace of ideas, it needs to do whatever it takes to gain that market share. And that means reaching the people where they are, making the content digestible to the public at large, and working on the presentation to even make that content even more digestible, all the while conveying the ideas that matter.
I think that's. But before anyone says, what do you think, Otter? I'm sorry, you've just. I didn't want to sideline you for this conversation. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I just don't watch videos in general.
Yeah.
I'm a different person, okay? From like I think it was about 2 years ago, I stopped watching Vosh, and at that time I was like, okay, this is not going anywhere. So I started to pick up like books, and I just started to reading. That's why a lot of people like in real life they like to call me a bookworm, because I'm truly that. But yeah, I do think that in the case of like trying to get after the algorithm, I think shorter videos are much more desirable than longer videos, because, for instance, in my interview, I don't think a lot of people would be generally interested in like, oh, what's post Keynesian economics? Like, even though like it depends on like what type of person you are, but even though it may or may not be interesting, at the same time, you would also have to consider, well, which topics are going to be more relatable, and as such, how can you gear your sort of like content towards that in order to um, get like a better advantage from the algorithm, so to speak.
But I also think that like approaching things from a focus on digestibility can be really useful. Like if instead of coming out with just an interview, we also came out with a short explaining the very basics of post-Keynesian economics in a digestible way, so that people kind of get a basic concept, grow an interest, and then we come out with an interview. Because we tease them beforehand, suddenly they want to know more. At least that's how I think about it in my head. But it's just kind of like an idea that should be tested.
But we did do a follow up to the post Keynesian economics, and that was the full employment short, and I recommend anybody watching to go watch that one.
Yeah, the full employment short was awesome.
Oh, thanks, man.
Maybe we should try
if we
doing
do
a
wanna-
similar concept, but in the reverse order.
What were you saying, Geeks?
You know, if we do want to like keep people engaged, I mean, we can. I don't think you guys have put out anything about like talking about inflation right now, or about like the Great Resignation or whatever, right?
No, I'd love to do a short on that. If
Yeah, because I think like
sorry,
there's room to add more stuff that's like, you know, because I don't know if we're talking about whatever decommodification, or we're talking about, you know, post Keynesian economics or something. I think you know, I love theory.
of course, yeah.
Was that one senator who was like on air saying, "I love the dialectic"?
Kennedy?
Yeah, I forget who it was, but I think there's probably more room to do stuff like, oh, you know, post Keynesianism has this theoretical idea, and here's how it fits here. You know what I mean? And I think a lot more people should be educated on like it is so easy to disprove a lot of ideas that are common in the media by like searching BLS or Fred like twice. I think that's, you know, we should present that stuff to people. Matt Darling had one recently about like, oh, people are always like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore, and the prime age employment to population ratio is like what it was in April of 2018.
Yeah,
it's like it's just not that different than it was a few years ago. And so yeah, I think we can. I'd be happy to make some of that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love for you to make some of that kind of content. I think generally the point of this is to make, like, I think all of us have very kind of similar views and underlying lineage of the kind of political thought that we want to, you know, espouse and think about. But I think that if we can make these concepts accessible to just the layman and not something that's super dense, I think
accessible and relevant. You know,
absolutely.
I think that the interview about Build Back Better was actually like particularly good because it was an interview that we had timed really well because we ended up releasing it on a very relevant time.
Yeah, and
we saw that in the audience reactions.
Yeah,
and I think that playing along those lines is really well, and also playing alongside of like the accessibility to the layman, and also showcasing the practical application of thought, not just presenting like the how pleasant those ideas can be, how interesting they are, but also how applicable they are.
I mean. Yeah, I think that's you know, other than the PK stuff that I did with Otter, and I think Matt Darling too, to an extent, it was like fantastic interview. I think, but one of the favorite ones that I've done is me and Chad interviewing Matt Bruning, because it was like a fucking dream come true. I mean, the plurality of us here are here in this kind of political positions because of all that we read about Matt Bruning, and it was just amazing to be interviewing him. But too, you're right, it was super relevant, and I think that that's the kind of stuff that people enjoy, and in a way that we can tell them that left-wing policy is good and it's applicable to what is going on in your life right now, and here's how we can tangibly improve your lives. And I think that's the kind of niche that we should be aiming to fill, and I think that's kind of what I intended when I started this whole thing, was to do stuff. But it's also it's super cool to be doing all this stuff with my friends too.
Yeah. And well, Andy, wave again. Would you be open to interviewing people who practice what you preach, like the many great cooperatives, smaller unions, and local governments that are trying left-wing ideas? I believe we are trying this in the back.
Yeah.
Backstage.
I'm trying to get an interview done with Eva Co-op, which is a rideshare service that's cooperatively owned by the workers, and this is something we already did an interview with with Leo Samolati, who's again a fantastic interview, and it's just so one of the things that he said that's always stuck out in my mind is that markets are kind of arenas where we have to compete with capitalists. And it's not something that we can eschew completely. Like, we have to be there, and we have to be present, and we have to make sure we kind of create these firms where the benefits accrue to all the people that participate in it. And we have to offer an alternative. So I think absolutely we would love to talk to people who practice what we preach. I think cooperatives are fantastic, and we are totally for it. And I think there's going to be some exciting content coming up specifically about cooperatives soon.
Yeah, I mean, Eva is also like a really interesting example for me, because essentially it's a rideshare service, much like Uber, except that it is cooperatively owned by the drivers. So to me, it can also be kind of, I think, presented as kind of like the cooperative model being a response to the gig economy, which is a very kind of new phenomenon, and we can look to maybe older cooperative models to respond to these new problems being showcased in the modern labor market. And also because, the vice president is a friend of mine.
And also, I think, Chad, you're going to be, when you're talking to Yui, I think, are you going to be talking about cooperatives at all, you think?
Yeah, unfortunately, there were some scheduling issues, so it's been moved to it's 2 weeks from now.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, so the plan would be to talk about, in general, like worker, democracy in the workplace. So it was meant to be, in relation to the video that you released in December, but then various things got in the way, and so
yeah,
here we are.
But at the same time, I also would like to maybe even make kind of a content critical of worker cooperatives.
Critical of worker cooperatives?
Oh yeah, essentially like how a lot of leftists look at worker cooperatives as the very basic means for the workers to gain the means of production, but really worker cooperatives are a limited way of achieving such goals. And if you're trying to create social ownership of of the means of production, they do not really allow for that social ownership to be as widespread as you would otherwise want. Especially since we have presented in our Markets Won't Solve Poverty video that roughly half of the population doesn't work, and therefore if social ownership is locked behind work requirements, then you've essentially just turned yourself into the Joe Manchin of socialism.
No, I think you're right. I think and I know Chad can speak more about this, but basically you're right. Even in a society where workers own completely all the capital goods, you still need a high level of redistribution, just because half the population just cannot participate in the kind of labor nexus. But I think Chad's talked about this a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, this is also why
even that side.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Go on, Chad.
Sorry, I thought you were.
Go.
So even that side, even the sort of like worker non-worker thing aside, which is definitely important. There's also just like the Marx ratio stuff, right? That there'd be a huge amount of inequality in terms of like we're thinking about how should we distribute capital income, right? This is a central question to socialists because right now, capital income, which is like a third of national income, goes almost entirely to a relatively small group of capital owners, and so how should we distribute this is a central question for socialists. And the work co-op answer is, well, the capital income, that is generated by each firm should go back to that firm. But this is, this obviously would create, a huge amount of inequality in terms of the distribution of that income. Not as much as, not as unequal as it is now, certainly. But this is like the Marx ratio thing, where you look at like very capital intensive firms versus say like Google, versus like the company that Google contracts to run their cafeterias, right? One of those very labor intensive, one of those very capital intensive, and a very capital intensive firm, worker at a very capital intensive firm gets a much larger share of capital income in total because there's much more because the firm that they're employed by is capital intensive, and given that firm boundaries are pretty arbitrary, right? Whether Google contracts out their their food service or whether those people are employees of Google, this is kind of arbitrary, at least from like a distributive justice kind of angle, and so it's not clear why why that distinction makes a huge difference to the amount of capital income that the people who are doing food service receive. And so, yeah, I mean, this is something that I think you'd want to talk about in terms of like co-ops are, I think, good and would work well in certain contexts. But they shouldn't be if you're an egalitarian, they shouldn't be like the basis for the whole economy. I don't think.
Yeah, because I also think of like how would even like retirement function under an economy that's entirely centered around worker co-ops. I mean, a worker who's capable of engaging in ownership all the while he works suddenly reaches retirement age. Is he going to have a desire to hold on to that ownership and therefore delay his retirement? How is that going to affect the labor market? Most of all, how is that going to affect their life as they're pushing themselves to work, whereas their body is not capable to keep up? And essentially, I think that it's really important for people to be able to engage in social ownership without requiring work necessarily. All the while, I think that workers, since they engage in production, not just through social ownership, but also through contribution in their very tangible labor, should be given probably a lot more weight in the democratic process that would happen through social ownership. And I think that social wealth funds through the state are also a very useful tool in redistributing wealth and acquiring revenue to help those who depend on the welfare state. But I think that if they are to really serve the social purposes of representing and being owned by the people, then at least the managers of those social wealth funds should be put in place through representational democracies. And I even think that there should be directly democratic elements introduced in them, a bit similarly to what Switzerland has. Switzerland has many different mail-in ballots on key policies or key issues, so that there is a directly democratic element within a representational democracy.
To be fair to the work co-op people, I don't think that there are too many that like to the retirement question you mentioned. I mean, aside of like mutualists, like the sort of like Center for a Stateless Society people, I don't think there are like a whole lot of people who are sort of like anarcho-capitalists, but all the firms are co-ops. Like I think most socialists, would also want some kind of welfare state, like an old age pension. But I think there is sort of like an important point in, a lot of the sort of like worker co-op advocacy seems to presume that like, I don't know, that the people be very attached to their firm. That like you're going to go and work at your firm and that's going to be your job for like, your whole life. But people like change around firms all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry?
There's this idea of the factory man that just comes into the factory, works there 25 years, punches in, punches out, and then after that he just retires, and he spent his entire life, devoted his entire career to this firm and essentially his group of coworkers that he spent those 25 years with.
Yeah, I think the average worker changes employers. It's like 6 or 7 times, I think, in their lifetime. And so yeah, I mean this sort of like, and so it seems, so in a world like that, a work co-op seems a little bit strange, because so every time you switch jobs, you're like selling your share, and then like you're buying in to to the next firm. It also means that like a lot, like from a diversification standpoint, it seems like a pretty big deal that like if the idea is that every firm is a worker co-op, well then you're putting a whole lot of your net worth, you're staking a whole lot of your net worth in the place where you work, and so if that firm goes under, now you're like extra fucked because you've lost your job and you've also lost like a good portion of your net worth, which was held in the firm. Seems a little bit strange.
Yeah, this is why I think that like investment through non-voting shares could also be somewhat of an interesting avenue, where essentially, sure, you can benefit from your investment, but you don't have necessarily any control over a firm. And this is pretty much in the perspective of any old individual investor who essentially, like, what is it exactly? What's the term for just the average person who engages in investing?
An investor.
Retail investor?
I'm sorry?
Retail investor?
Yeah, retail investor.
Yeah.
So like from the perspective of a retail investor, yeah, it's you know that you're not going to get any kind of significant amount of control over a firm by buying stock in it. You're just aiming to get returns on that investment. And I think that those returns definitely need to be taxed and redistributed.
No, I think Keegs had a really good article on this, and it's the case for why social insurance exists, insofar as that retirement and aging are a very predictable risk from being human, and I think, Chad, you're absolutely right. Is that when you tie these kind of benefits to on a firm level, that kind of ties your retirement income to the existence of a firm. I think that's a very suboptimal way to kind of provide consumption smoothing over your lifetime. I think just states are just much better at running this kind of stuff. So I don't think we should look at. I mean, I love worker co-ops. I love consumer co-ops. But these are not ways of entirely running a society. And this is exactly what Leo talked about in the interview. These are places where we can compete with capitalists for sure, and this is good. This is what we need to do, but this is not something that needs to exist everywhere, and that is the kind of fix everything kind of solution to the problems that we have, even in terms of the consumption smoothing that we expect over a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I picture them more like tools, and tools have their purpose, but if you try and use them outside of their purpose, you're going to get diminishing returns.
Sorry, you were saying, Chad?
Well, this is something that I would like to see, more. I don't know. I would like to see someone talk about this on the left, and I have maybe some ideas, but I don't know that I have a really cohesive answer to this question for sort of, in what contexts are worker co-ops preferable, versus in what context consumer co-ops are preferable, versus in what contexts social state-owned enterprises are preferable, versus ownership through a social wealth fund, these sorts of things. Like I would like to see. I don't know. I mean, I have maybe some attributes that jump out where I'd be like, oh well, if it's like a super labor-intensive firm, there's not a whole lot of like supervision required or something. Maybe like a ride-sharing sort of scenario. Maybe that's an area where worker co-ops make a lot of sense. I don't know, but I don't feel like I have a really cohesive theory of sort of like where these where these puzzle pieces fit. And I would like, I don't know. I'd like to see some. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this. I would like to see, I don't know, some more stuff on this.
Yeah, I think. I always love discussions along those lines. But I think one thing that's important to mention here, I think you can probably talk about this in your interview with you each, Ed, is there's a difference between control of decision making in firms versus control of investment in firms.
Right.
And
right.
Which in turn is not the same as stock ownership, because you can own stock that's non-voting, and then you get money, but you don't really have control over what happens in the firm. Or also, I mean, if a company just sells some bonds, right? It's not like the stockholders get to vote on a board of directors and stuff, but bondholders don't. And so like it's I think a lot of times when people talk about worker cooperatives, a lot of that stuff gets pushed all together, and like people think of it as like, oh well, either you're controlling all the financing and all the investment and everyone has to buy in, or you're not. But like there's a bunch of different combinations of ways that you can do that. You can have a you can have a firm where the board is 100% elected by the workers, and they still and the actual capital stock isn't owned by workers. Totally viable thing.
I mean,
No reason you can't do that.
the
so I
creation
think
of a
it's-
representational democracy within a workplace just ends up creating a managerial class, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that is true. That's a fair point too. I don't think we should we shouldn't pretend that this happens in unions all the time, right? The union leaders don't always have the exact same opinions as the workers. But anyways, I think it's better to discuss like, okay, how should what should the decision making control be like in the day to day? Well, what about like longer term investment plans? Who should control that? Who should own these different types of capital in the industry? And those answers aren't going to be all the same all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I think one of my favorite articles that
the case for like workers having control over day-to-day decision making in firms is a lot stronger than workers like owning the stock of a firm.
Yeah,
I think.
No, well, as I was saying, I think one of my favorite articles that you've written is about the case for social insurance or the welfare state as is, and I think it's a fantastic piece that everybody should read. And
one more thing I want to say about the retirement point too, and I think that this ties into my article, is like, if we want to ensure people have a good retirement, we don't have to run that through the stock market if we don't want to. We could just hand people money. Like the Social Security Trust Fund, it's its own little weird thing, and like, yeah, we should diversify it. It'll get us more money. Sure, why not? But like, we don't have to do it that way. We can just pass out money to people. That's fine. And yeah.
And it works, right? I mean, it brings what, like 36 to 38% of people.
Yeah, I think
old
the
people
number
in
is
poverty. Yeah.
before Social Security, 38% of people are elderly people are in poverty, and after it, 10% of elderly people are in poverty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane how much good that program does.
Oh, it's a fantastic. Like generally, like same thing with unemployment, old age kind of insurance is like it's suboptimal because you always have to oversave to ensure that you have the amount of adequate capital to exist through your lifetime.
And as a general
lifetime.
Yeah, and as a general rule, we don't want to try to encourage people to, at least not all of the time, encourage people to save a lot of money, because consumption is what drives the economy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It's just like it to me. It just highlights how much we are. Our current method of viewing pensions, of viewing the welfare state, also is so driven around the workers themselves, and how much it's
very true.
It just ends up letting our other, most of the time, most vulnerable citizens out. It ends up leaving them behind and failing them. We talk about our elderly who end up with inadequate pensions. We look at our children who are in need of most help but don't end up not receiving it. We can talk about the disabled. All of these people whose abilities to engage in the labor market are either not present yet, have expired, or are limited, and therefore the way that we currently shape our welfare state around helping the working poor simply does not fit their needs.
This is something that I've noticed a lot. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The really shocking thing is how callous people are to like the needs of in the U.S., kids especially. I mean, we couldn't even the extended child tax credit extended in December, which I'm going to be mad about forever. But for kids or elderly people or people with disabilities, it's like people are so shockingly unsympathetic a lot of times to their needs.
There's the big mentality of, why should I have to take care of someone else's kid? And it's just like, well, if you weren't able to support your kid, wouldn't you want someone to help them?
Right.
I think most of the arguments for leftism that I make are just it's generally just the umbrella of that we should genuinely just take care of each other because we can and we have the means to do so, and there's no reason why we shouldn't. And it's I don't like That's that. I think that's the entire argument to me. We should love and care for one another. And what you were talking about, Keeks, with the child tax credit is a excellent example of that, because I think the stats came out today, and child poverty rose by a fucking huge amount, obviously, because
Yeah,
the cash
I think it
payment.
went from like 12% to 17%, about 5 million more
Mhm.
kids in poverty, if I remember right.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, like lots of people are like, oh, like why should I have to subsidize other people's lifestyles? It's like, how do you tell people that it's just we should just genuinely just care about each other?
I don't, I think that this sentiment exists about like people being callous towards children, but I don't actually think that's where a lot of it, like, I think a lot of people don't think of, like the child tax credit as being a benefit for children. I think they see it as a benefit for parents. And so what they say is, and that makes it easier, right? Like, and I think in a lot of the discussions about poverty, I've been noticing this more and more, ever since, once you become like Brunig pilled or whatever, right? And I noticed more and more, like when there was a discourse about food stamps, on Twitter, there was just this like tacit assumption, I think, that like the people in poverty, and maybe just because like the people who are having it are like probably young, probably don't have kids, but like there's just this like idea that that like the person on food stamps is someone who's just like sort of like 20 something who doesn't make very much money, right? Or just like some a worker doesn't make that much money. And the reality is that like it's the people without incomes, right? It's children, and this is something I know you guys all know and agree with. But I think this is like this I think explains better people's callousness, because they don't see it as going towards, they think of poverty as like someone who doesn't get who's lazy or whatever, and don't think about like all of the all of their dependents, right? All of these workers' dependents, as really where the driver of poverty is. So what I would like to see, and and obviously we do this a lot on our corner of Twitter, but like what I would hope to see, more on sort of the national stage or whatever, is to say that like this isn't a benefit for parents, this is a benefit for children, right? Like I think that's a really powerful way to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's children deserve an income. Like non-workers deserve an income, and you're absolutely right. The Brunig pill is startling, and we're well versed in it, but everybody misunderstands it. It's the centrists and the right and the left totally misunderstand what the welfare state is for, and I'm talking beyond just social insurance for the risks that you face as somebody who participates in the labor market, but the welfare as a delineated thing it's for non-workers. And if you can't understand that point, you'll always make really asinine arguments for or against it, even in the left. And this is what Brunig talks about, is that people think, oh, like welfare is to get money from rich people to poor people. It's not, Chad, you're right. It's like it's about getting money to non-workers, and that's important. That's really important, because as you said before, that's one of the main drivers of poverty.
Yeah, I also feel like the whole discussion about like child care support, actually just being support to the parent is is just like an expression of the dehumanization of children in our society, where we just see them as like an extension of their parent rather than a person of their own. But also the reality is like, I want to give like an example that's kind of personal to me. Okay. My father, like I grew up poor. I was raised by a single father who was a high school dropout and had to work long hours, working for my grandmother. And because he had to work long hours, he often couldn't pick me up from school. He couldn't even pick me up from after school care. And so my grandmother had to, because the school was shutting down and they couldn't keep me. If he hadn't been working for my grandmother, and if my grandmother had not been willing to help by being the one picking me up from school, he would have had to turn down a lot of hours. And therefore, he would have lost a lot of income that he depended on to support me and himself. And now imagine if he had not had my grandmother there to help him, and he had not had any additional benefits to help support myself and himself, we would have both been in a worse position. And then who knows how we could have ended up. Because there are many years when I was actively wondering if my dad could make rent.
income to non-workers is important.
Yeah.
Everybody, you know, and I just another one of the arguments I always have for this stuff is that, you know, we live in some of the richest societies in all the world, and if we're able to take care of everybody, we just should, and I think that's compelling to me.
Yeah.
I think we should do a short on this, by the way. This is once you sort of conceptualize the welfare state as being, you know, getting money to non-workers, it all kind of falls into place. It makes the welfare state like make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like it makes it obvious in some sense, right? Like, oh yeah, there are a whole bunch of people who don't work. If we get them an income, then, you know, it doesn't really matter if people form their households. Everyone's kind of taken care of,
Yeah.
right? Like everyone's going to be okay. And it's sort of hard, right? Like a lot of those categories, with the exception of the unemployed, who people, you know, do like to you know, shit on. Like the rest of them, kind of like the disabled, the elderly, children. These are being the three biggest categories anyway. Like these are things that's really hard to malign, right? So if you can really make these benefits about, you know, it's not about who's else in the household. It's about these children and assigning incomes to them. I mean, I think that's very powerful. And so this seems like something that you communicate in a very short form way. Be good for a short.
I absolutely agree, and I think you know, People's Policy Project put out an excellent graphic today. That was I'm sure you guys saw it. It's just about how, you know, how to conceptualize welfare, and it's just literally about you know, sending money to non-workers. But I think one thing, I think Keeks can answer this better than I can. But one of the questions is that, okay, like how do we delineate like social insurance versus welfare? So when we talk about like welfare, you know, we say this is income to non-workers, which is good and all, but do you guys feel like social insurance is this it's its own thing separately, like you know, state dispensed healthcare or unemployment insurance or state dispensed pension schemes? Do you feel like that's different, or do you think that's part of the same kind of panoply of policy positions?
I think there's a I think David Sliger has made this argument a few times that like the focusing on, you know, welfare about getting money to poor people, one of the, like you said, it leads you to make kind of analytical mistakes, and one of them is that like the natural outcome of that is just like, oh, we should do means testing, and like that logically that doesn't actually follow, you know, for reasons we've talked about 1,000 times, but a lot of stuff exploding on my screen. But it's very natural to think that, right? Whereas if you come at it from a social insurance viewpoint first, then like you'll be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter if this person is like upper middle class, like, you know, they still need insurance because they're going to get old, so we should give them insurance. And so I think part of this is that like the social insurance frame just leads people to think of better policy. You know, no one would think of making Social Security act like food stamps does. Like that's not how they think of the program at all. So yeah, I think it's about, you know, not only is social insurance, you know, or socializing insurance good for its own reasons, but it also kind of gets people in the right frame of mind to make good policy.
Would you frame like a child benefit as like, it's like child insurance? Like,
yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna ask.
Well, yeah, I mean, the worst part is I think I child insurance.
I'm thinking about that for a second. I personally find that argument really convincing. I don't know if other people would.
Yeah.
I think other people would go. I think other people would go to like a moral hazard place when that's not. Obviously, that doesn't really make sense, right? People don't have children because they like.
I hear that all the time.
Range of benefits. Yeah.
I even hear it from like liberals. I mentioned, like, oh yeah, we got this big % child tax credit, and people are like, oh well, you know, the problem is a lot of people, you know, are just gonna have more children to get it, and I'm like, I don't know how to tell you, that makes no fucking sense.
Well, and even if it did, it's like a good thing, and then I just people don't understand that. Like you have to think intertemporally, as in, you know,
right.
If you want goods and services like 40 years from now, you're gonna need like a healthy population of people to do it, and so you would want to have more children.
Yeah, I mean,
there's
the
a great
thing is, like, the
article
birth rates are declining globally right now. Like, if you, like, who cares if it leads people to have more kids? We need more people to be able to sustain
people will
long
make
term.
more stuff, and there'll be more innovation and growth. Oh, God forbid.
Oh my god.
Horror.
How will we ever live in such society? Anyway, we're like getting
yeah,
close
what-
till
I
11
wanna be
o'clock. We've been going for
specific.
2 hours, but yeah, I don't want to keep you guys for too long because you know it's a Saturday
Oh.
night, and I get you guys.
I know,
I guess you guys have things to do too.
Yeah.
I already slept through my D&D campaign this morning, so
Oh,
yeah, I
no.
got nothing else going.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh god. Okay. Well, if you
But
guys
one
want
thing I wanted to mention is the one of the articles I read that was really convincing on this, talking about how government should have an expanded role in social insurance. One of the things they talk about is like, yeah, you can make all these arguments about how like people are supposed to smooth their incomes across their lives and stuff, but if you're a kid, you can't do that, so markets don't work. And I was like, oh yeah, of course, like obviously. Yeah, and that argument was like super convincing to me that the government should have, you know, I mean, we already do play a big role with public schools, of course, but
Oh, that's
should play an even bigger role in that stuff. But yeah, you're right, and I think too. I mean, you know, and of course in America we need to talk about how I think just having kids is like giving kids welfare is a racialized thing in the U.S. In a way that which I don't know. It shocked me how much this seems to be true after the extended child tax credit and everything.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that I don't really think is true for old people and stuff like that.
Mm.
And yeah, that sucks. That's real bad. I don't know how to fix racism.
You think this is like welfare queen imagery? Like people have this image of like a poor mother who just like lives on welfare and has a bunch of kids because somehow
exactly.
she ends up financially. The idea is somehow she ends up financially ahead from child benefits.
It's kind of
Yeah, it
crazy
does not
how
make any
racialized
sense.
stereotypes are in America too, because like all of the ones that I've seen in media coming from here, like all of the so-called welfare queens, they're all white.
And it wouldn't matter whatever they are. It does not.
No,
yeah,
it's
just
just like-
deserve income as a single mother or your child deserve income too. That's
No, but I feel like it's just like the racialized element is kind of like to both serves to like demonize both people of color and welfare.
oh yeah, absolutely. And I know what article you're talking about, Keeks. I think you sent it to me right after the interview. I think it's a really eye-opening article, especially because of what you're talking about with public school. And we're talking about just the common like principal agent problem you run across in economics is that okay, you know, you can only kind of retroactively look at your education as an adult and then decide like how much you would invest into it over time. But you have somebody else making that decision for you, and they're not really reaping the kind of outcomes of that. So you would decide differently. You know, if you had the
if you can go back in time and do it right, but literally not possible.
Exactly.
That's not how a child works.
Yeah.
Biologically speaking.
Yeah, I wish you would. I wish you could. You know, I wish I could go back.
Kids
I
just
wish I
go
could
get
go
a
back.
loan.
Sorry.
Kids should just go get a loan.
Yeah,
I
honestly,
understand.
they
Get
should
a loan, they'll pay it
bootstrap
back when they're older
themselves.
and they're getting income.
You know what? 8-year-olds should be able to like sign on a mortgage. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a perfectly fine way
You know what?
to run a
Back,
society.
you know what? My grandfather, back when he was 8 years old, he was out there in the freaking woods working as a lumberjack. Okay, he was out of school. He was earning his way into the world, and look at it. Look at him now. Okay, look at him now. He's doing great. So why can't
I
your
thought you were gonna
kid-
say he's dead. I don't know where this is.
No, my grandpa's actually
dead.
really doing great, but
like yeah.
He
he's
died
doing
in a
great.
tragic lumberjack accident.
Hey. No, I mean seriously. Like he started working in the woods when he was 8 years old. Now he's like almost 80. He's still in those woods.
Yeah,
He's still working.
he never found his way back home. It's really
Yeah,
tough being a
someday-
child in the woods.
You know, come back.
Amber Alert is still on.
Someday.
I don't know how he ended up founding a family while still being disappeared, but somehow he did.
Anyway.
my thoughts on that are I gotta run to the bathroom.
No, I was just gonna ask. It's getting close to 11. I do want to call it a night too. So, I would love to hear some final closing statements from all you guys. Sure. Keeks in the washroom, so we'll tell them when they get back. But you guys go ahead.
I won't leave yet if we're just saying stuff to close. Hey, it was nice chatting with y'all. I actually don't know. How does Joe's hair look right now?
Oh, how does my hair look? I'll have to like take a picture with like the flash on to really showcase it.
Wait, did
The
you just
bisexual
dye it
lighting isn't
without
really-
bleaching it?
What?
Huh? No, I
Did you just
did.
dye it?
No, I did bleach it. I bleached it before the stream.
Ah.
Oh my god, it's actually pink. I thought you were kidding.
It looks brown from here.
Oh no, it was we did a ball cap, so only parts of it are pink.
That's insulting to my
Ah,
people.
gotcha.
Don't call it a bald cap. Instead of
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Sid
You
is
can
feeling
say
discriminated.
brown
yeah,
is an
I mean,
ugly
you
color
guys
all
get to
you want,
dye
but
your
don't
hair.
make
What the
fun of
what the fuck do I get to do? A pink scalp? Fuck that. Anyway, yeah, sorry. Chad, Otter, some closing words for us and the direction that we're going in this year.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is something I think we could do this, something like this, with some regularity, if you guys wanted. I don't know, just like it's like streamer content. I mean, this is something we talked about, I think, before, like doing like kind of like periodic roundtables or something. Just like get some current events together or something, have some topic, and sort of like I don't know, have hash it out in kind of a loose, informal way. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be really good, and I think that I remember that like BB in the chat asked us specifically a question about the current day events in Canada. Lots going down there. Unfortunately, we won't be able to address this today, but if we do some kind of roundtable where we do bring like everyday events, topical discussions, then those are probably going to be the content where we're going to end up having those kinds of discussions, and you might be able to be looking forward to that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like absolutely always lovely chatting with Keegs and Chad. I don't get the opportunity enough, so it's absolutely a pleasure to have them here. And I would absolutely love to do more of this kind of content with them.
And Sid, I will download Warzone sometime soon.
Let's go!
Yeah, I kind of agree with Peepinchi that Twitch would work better for this kind of content, but we're trying to like really consolidate all of our video content on YouTube. Maybe we could try restreams to be able to stream on both at the same time.
Yeah, and anyway, also Otter. Otter's got some really cool articles coming up, and his article on the Competes Act was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should check out his Substack.
It was actually so solid, and he's got one coming out on the Rain Meidner plan that's hopefully going to be out soon. I'm sorry, what are your thoughts, Mr. Otter Paji?
So far I'm thinking that it might be actually like a really long article. Like
it's fine.
I'm actually anticipating it to be like around 10 pages because of how extensive the model was. Like, and I have like 2 pages of references going on. It's gonna be a banger.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I actually really want to like take your articles and kind of like compartmentalize them in short videos also, and so that like the more content you give us, the more we get to like kind of like cram and work into making concise, and the creative aspect of making that happen to me is like really enjoyable. So I can't.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean honestly, like I don't know if you get enough credit for like doing what you are at your age. Like it's actually like fantastic, and I'm looking forward to the article a lot. So hoping to read it as soon as possible. But yeah, anyway, on my end too, it's been a real pleasure starting this channel. It's been a real pleasure having all the people that I've had on the interviews, and it's been immensely rewarding to work with all of you. And we're all it's really funny that we just kind of all met on Twitter and we're kind of dispersed across the globe. But now for a brief moment of pride, it's like, okay, now we're like creating content that people listen to, and I kind of enjoy having that responsibility alongside all of you. I think it's really cool that we're all on this great adventure together.
Yeah.
Yes, the creative.
I'll see you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I just all I can really say is that I'm really also thankful that Sid brought me onto this. When I remember like all of the funny times when we're at like friends gatherings and people ask us how we met, we end up just like kind of like looking away shyly and just saying Twitter. But then like when like this great friendship came of it, and we ended up working together on this project, and I think it's become like a really great outlet for both of us and a really important part of our lives at this point. And really like a positive force. And it's kind of funny how I ended up joining in just I think it was after the 3rd episode where like there was one episode with just terrible audio, just absolutely horrendous.
I'm being victimized on stream. It's terrible.
And I just go like, "Hey, Sid, I know a little bit about audio editing. If you need any help, I can, I can lend a hand." And this is how my contribution essentially started. And now I'm more involved in this than I've ever thought I would be, and I'm all the more thankful for it. And I can't wait to be even more involved.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, anyway, moral of the story: it's been a good time, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you all on. So let's call it a night, boys, if that's all okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, have a good night.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you in all the content we have in the future.
Yeah, have a nice night, everyone. And
Like and subscribe.
like,
Yeah,
comment,
comment,
subscribe.
subscribe.
Ring that bell. Give me your firstborn.
DM me your favorite racial slur. I want to. No, I'm just kidding.
If you have a cute sister, send me her number.
What is wrong with you?
Bye. On that note, bye.
On that note, yeah. Good night.
Good night, guys.